Hi friends, welcome to the enchanting world of Aesop's Fables, where timeless tales come to life in the form of an audiobook. Aesop, a legendary ancient storyteller, weaves together a tapestry of moral lessons through the voices of animals, mythical creatures, and everyday characters. These fables, passed down through generations, teach us valuable life lessons in the most captivating way. Through the soothing tones of the narrator, let these fables transport you to distant lands and times, where the simplest of stories carry the weight of profound truths. Join us as we explore the ageless wisdom of Aesop's Fables. Aesop's Fables, Part 2. The Fox and the Stork. The fox one day thought of a plan to amuse himself at the expense of the stork, at whose odd appearance he was always laughing. "You must come and dine with me today," he said to the stork, smiling to himself at the trick he was going to play. The stork gladly accepted the invitation, and arrived in good time, and with a very good appetite. For dinner, the fox served soup. But it was set out in a very shallow dish, and all the stork could do was to wet the very tip of his bill. Not a drop of soup could he get. But the fox lapped it up easily, and, to increase the disappointment of the stork, made a great show of enjoyment. The hungry stork was much displeased at the trick, but he was a calm, even-tempered fellow and saw no good in flying into a rage. Instead, not long afterward, he invited the fox to dine with him in turn. The fox arrived promptly at the time that had been set, and the stork served a fish dinner that had a very appetizing smell. But it was served in a tall jar, with a very narrow neck. The stork could easily get at the food with his long bill, but all the fox could do was to lick the outside of the jar, and sniff at the delicious odor. And when the fox lost his temper, the stork said calmly, "Do not play tricks on your neighbors, unless you can stand the same treatment yourself." End of the story, The Fox and the Stork. The moral of the story is, one should not try to make fun of the other's limitations, and people will treat you the same you treat them. The Two Goats. Two goats, frisking gaily on the rocky steeps of a mountain valley, chanced to meet, one on each side of a deep chasm, through which poured a mighty mountain torrent. The trunk of a fallen tree formed the only means of crossing the chasm, and on this, not even two squirrels could have passed each other in safety. The narrow path would have made the bravest tremble. Not so our goats. Their pride would not permit either to stand aside for the other. One set her foot on the log. The other did likewise. In the middle, they met horn to horn. Neither would give way, and so they both fell, to be swept away by the roaring torrent below. End of the story, The Two Goats. The moral of the story is, it is better to yield than to come to misfortune through stubbornness. The Wild Boar and the Fox. A wild boar was sharpening his tusks busily against the stump of a tree when a fox happened by. Now the fox was always looking for a chance to make fun of his neighbors. So he made a great show of looking anxiously about, as if in fear of some hidden enemy. But the boar kept right on with his work. "Why are you doing that?" asked the fox, at last with a grin. "There isn't any danger that I can see." "True enough," replied the boar, "but when danger does come, there will not be time for such work as this." My weapons will have to be ready for use then, or I shall suffer for it." End of the story. The Wild Boar and the Fox. The moral of the story is, preparedness for war is the best guarantee of peace. The Heron. A heron was walking sedately along the bank of a stream, his eyes on the clear water, and his long neck and pointed bill ready to snap up a likely morsel for his breakfast. The clear water swarmed with fish, but Master Heron was hard to please that morning. "No small fry for me," he said. "Such scanty fare is not fit for a heron." Now a fine young perch swam near. "No indeed," said the heron. "I wouldn't even trouble to open my beak for anything like that." As the sun rose, the fish left the shallow water near the shore, and swam below into the cool depths toward the middle. The heron saw no more fish, and very glad was he at last to breakfast on a tiny snail. End of the story. The Heron. The moral of the story is, do not be too hard to suit, or you may have to be content with the worst, or with nothing at all. The Fox and the Goat. A fox fell into a well, and though it was not very deep, he found that he could not get out again. After he had been in the well a long time, a thirsty goat came by. The goat thought the fox had gone down to drink, and he asked if the water was good. "The finest in the whole country," said the crafty fox. "Jump in and try it. There is more than enough for both of us." The thirsty goat immediately jumped in and began to drink. The fox just as quickly jumped on the goat's back, and leaped from the tip of the goat's horns out of the well. The foolish goat now saw what a plight he had got into, and begged the fox to help him out. But the fox was already on his way to the woods. "If you had as much sense as you have beard, old fellow," he said as he ran, "you would have been more cautious about finding a way to get out again before you jumped in." End of the story. The Fox and the Goat. The moral of the story is, look before you leap. The Stag and His Reflection. A stag, drinking from a crystal spring, saw himself mirrored in the clear water. He greatly admired the graceful arch of his antlers, but he was very much ashamed of his spindling legs. "How can it be," he sighed, "that I should be cursed with such legs, when I have so magnificent a crown?" At that moment, he scented a panther and in an instant was bounding away through the forest. But as he ran, his wide-spreading antlers caught in the branches of the trees, and soon the panther overtook him. Then the stag perceived that the legs of which he was so ashamed would have saved him, had it not been for the useless ornaments on his head. End of the story. The Stag and His Reflection. The moral of the story is, we often make much of the ornamental, and despise the useful. The Cock and the Fox. One bright evening, as the sun was sinking on a glorious world, a wise old cock flew into a tree to roost. Before he composed himself to rest, he flapped his wings 3 times, and crowed loudly. But just as he was about to put his head under his wing, his beady eyes caught a flash of red and a glimpse of a long pointed nose, and there just below him stood Master Fox. "Have you heard the wonderful news?" cried the fox, in a very joyful and excited manner. "What news?" asked the cock very calmly. But he had a queer, fluttery feeling inside him, for, You know, he was very much afraid of the fox. Your family and mine and all other animals have agreed to forget their differences and live in peace and friendship, from now on forever. Just think of it. I simply cannot wait to embrace you. Do come down, dear friend, and let us celebrate the joyful event." "How grand," said the cock. "I certainly am delighted at the news." But he spoke in an absent way, and stretching up on tiptoes, seemed to be looking at something afar off. "What is it you see?" asked the fox a little anxiously. "Why, it looks to me like a couple of dogs coming this way. They must have heard the good news and—" But the fox did not wait to hear more. Off he started on a run. "Wait!" cried the cock. "Why do you run? The dogs are friends of yours now." "Yes," answered the fox. "But they might not have heard the news. Besides, I have a very important errand that I had almost forgotten about." The cock smiled, as he buried his head in his feathers and went to sleep, for he had succeeded in outwitting a very crafty enemy. End of the story, The Cock and the Fox. The moral of the story is, the trickster is easily tricked. The Frog and the Mouse. A young mouse in search of adventure was running along the bank of a pond, where lived a frog. When the frog saw the mouse, he swam to the bank and croaked, "Won't you pay me a visit? I can promise you a good time if you do." The mouse did not need much coaxing, for he was very anxious to see the world and everything in it. But though he could swim a little, he did not dare risk going into the pond without some help. The frog had a plan. He tied the mouse's leg to his own with a tough reed. Then into the pond he jumped, dragging his foolish companion with him. The mouse soon had enough of it and wanted to return to shore, but the treacherous frog had other plans. He pulled the mouse down under the water and drowned him. But before he could untie the reed that bound him to the dead mouse, a hawk came sailing over the pond. Seeing the body of the mouse floating on the water, the hawk swooped down, seized the mouse, and carried it off, with the frog dangling from its leg. Thus at one swoop, he had caught both meat and fish for his dinner. End of the story, The Frog and the Mouse. The moral of the story is, those who seek to harm others often come to harm themselves through their own deceit. The Fox and the Leopard. A fox and a leopard, resting lazily after a generous dinner, amused themselves by disputing about their good looks. The leopard was very proud of his glossy, spotted coat and made disdainful remarks about the fox, whose appearance he declared was quite ordinary. The fox prided himself on his fine bushy tail with its tip of white, but he was wise enough to see that he could not rival the leopard in looks. Still, he kept up a flow of sarcastic talk, just to exercise his wits and to have the fun of disputing. The leopard was about to lose his temper when the fox got up, yawning lazily. "You may have a very smart coat," he said, "but you would be a great deal better off if you had a little more smartness inside your head, and less on your ribs, the way I am. That's what I call real beauty." End of the story, The Fox and the Leopard. The moral of the story is, a fine coat is not always an indication of an attractive mind. The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. A certain wolf could not get enough to eat, because of the watchfulness of the shepherds. But one night, he found a sheepskin that had been cast aside and forgotten. The next day, dressed in the skin, the wolf strolled into the pasture with the sheep. Soon a little lamb was following him about, and was quickly led away to slaughter. That evening the wolf entered the fold with the flock. But it happened that the shepherd took a fancy for mutton broth that very evening, and, picking up a knife, went to the fold. There the first he laid hands on and killed was the wolf. End of the story. The wolf in sheep's clothing. The moral of the story is, the evil doer often comes to harm through his own deceit. End of Aesop's Fables, Part 2. Thank you for watching. Hope you have enjoyed the audiobook, Aesop's Fables, Part 2. Please listen to the next episode. Do not forget to comment, share, like, and subscribe to the video. Visit our channel, www.youtube.com/@weaversnest, for more interesting videos. For more information, visit the website, www.weaversnest.org.